Welcome back to Saltwater Stories. I am so thrilled to have you with us for this very special time of year. Just like our previous end-of-year gatherings, our tradition is one of focusing on hope and resilience. We want to celebrate big wins that show how amazing the ocean and the people protecting it can be.
It's the perfect mood setter. For a long time, the news about our oceans has felt, well, heavy, full of complicated threats and challenges. But 2025, it really felt like a true turning point. A year defined not by the sad news, but by major victories that remind us that, damage can be reversed when we choose cooperation.
Exactly. We've spent hours sifting through the reports, and what emerges are two monumental success stories that operated on completely different scales. On one hand, you had the incredible biological resurrection of a gentle ocean giant, and on the other, we witnessed the global community finally come together to write a brand new, comprehensive rule book for the high seas, the two-thirds of the planet that belongs to everyone.
That's right. So today we're doing a thorough analysis of the comeback of the green sea turtle, which tells this amazing story of technological genius and real community dedication. And then we'll analyze the huge legal milestone of the High Seas Treaty, which finally brought real protection to the vast open ocean.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with the turtle that literally swam its way back from the brink. This story is so important because it shows us that even when things look really, really bad, nature has this incredible power to heal itself if we give it a helping hand.
And when we talk about the green sea turtle, its scientific name is Chelonia mitis. We are discussing not only the largest of all the hard-shelled sea turtles, but one of the most widely distributed. These magnificent animals undertake these epic journeys, often traveling thousands of miles between their feeding grounds and the beaches where they were born.
And what truly sets the green sea turtle apart, and why its recovery is so vital for the entire marine ecosystem, is its diet. Unlike their cousins, the loggerheads or the hawksbills, which are hunters, green sea turtles are the only sea turtles that are dedicated vegetarians.
They are true herbivores. They specialize in feeding almost exclusively on marine plants, so primarily delicate seagrasses and algae. And this dietary niche gives them a unique and an absolute critical role in the coastal environment.
They're like the ecosystem's gardeners, right? They don't just eat the plants, they make sure the garden stays healthy.
Precisely. We use the analogy of a lawnmower, and it's perfect. If seagrass beds are left alone, the blades grow too long, they accumulate slime, and they end up choking themselves out. It's a bit like letting weeds take over a garden patch. By regularly grazing and clipping the tops of the seagrass, the turtles encourage new, healthy growth. This grazing ensures the whole seagrass ecosystem remains robust and highly productive.
And we know how important healthy seagrass beds are. They are a kind of natural treasure chest.
Oh, they are foundational. These healthy, well-maintained seagrass beds serve as indispensable nurseries, where thousands of species of juvenile fish, crabs, and shellfish get their start in life, protected from bigger predators. They also have an even bigger job. They are incredibly efficient at capturing and storing carbon from the atmosphere, helping to stabilize the global climate.
And just a quick note for you, our listener, if you want to understand the full magical impact of these underwater meadows, we did a whole session on seagrass beds back in Season 1. If you'd like to learn more, you should definitely check out that previous session.
Now, to grasp the scale of the 2025 victory, we really need to understand the historical catastrophe. These populations were once, well, almost limitless.
The early accounts are truly wild. I mean, imagine being a European sailor in the 17th or 18th century coming across the Caribbean. Historical logs describe literally fleets of turtles, so many that the sound of their breathing and the sight of their shells on the surface actually impeded the progress of sailing ships. The abundance was just staggering.
That staggering abundance sadly made them a primary target. They faced what conservationists called the triple threat that drove them to the edge of extinction over just a few generations.
The first threat was direct harvesting, often driven by, status and commerce?
Absolutely. The green turtle was hunted relentlessly, primarily for the famous green turtle soup, which was a massive delicacy in Europe and North America. It signified wealth and social status. This demand created an industrial-scale market for turtle meat, oil, and eggs. But the value didn't stop there. The shells were also prized, not as highly as the hawksbills, but they were still widely used for decorative items.
So millions and millions of turtles were removed from the ocean. That's a direct lethal blow to the population.
It was, and it was compounded by the second threat, losing their home base. Green turtles must haul themselves onto sandy beaches to lay their eggs. As coastal areas boomed with development, beaches turned into resorts, hotels, and coastal infrastructure, they lost the safe, quiet, dark havens they needed. Less available nesting habitat just means fewer babies are successfully hatched.
And the third threat, which was maybe the most devastating in the modern era, was bycatch, the accidental killing in commercial fishing gear.
Yes, this was particularly acute with industrial shrimping trawlers. A trawler uses these huge, wide-mouthed nets dragged along the seafloor to scoop up shrimp. But these nets, they're indiscriminate. They collect everything. Unwanted fish, debris, and critically air-breathing sea turtles. Since an adult turtle can only hold its breath for maybe an hour or two when it's stressed, if it's trapped in a net on the seafloor, it drowns quickly.
So you have mass exploitation, habitat destruction on the beach, and industrial accidents at sea. That is a combination that is nearly impossible to survive.
It wasn't. The historical population decline was estimated conservatively at between 48% and 67% globally across 3 generations. The severity was recognized by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, which in 1982 officially listed the green sea turtle as endangered. That classification means the species was considered to have a very, very high chance of going extinct in the wild.
And that just sets the stage for the enormous piece of good news from October 2025. It's hard to imagine going from the emergency room to the all clear in just a few decades.
But that's precisely what happened. The IUCN conducted its latest reassessment and announced a global status change for Chelonia mitis from endangered all the way to least concern. That is a seismic shift in conservation status. It signifies a successful, species-wide recovery.
And this isn't based on just optimism, it's based on hard data. What do the numbers show us about this recovery?
The aggregate data is powerful. The global population has rebounded by an impressive 28% since the lowest estimates of the 1970s. However, the real story, the really exciting part, is found in the local examples where the recovery isn't just steady, it's exponential.
Okay, give us the headline numbers that truly illustrate this surge.
Look at Florida in the USA. Historically, after decades of decline, this region saw fewer than 500 nests per year. That's a tiny number for a species that requires massive volume to sustain itself. But in 2023, just 2 years before the reclassification, Florida recorded an all-time high of 77,042 nests.
77,000 from 500. That's an increase of over 150 times. It just shows that when protection is robust, the turtles can breed back so quickly.
And this isn't just an Atlantic success story, is it?
Not at all. In the Indian Ocean, around the Seychelles, decades of strict protection and sustained monitoring efforts resulted in an astounding 500% increase in documented egg-laying activity. These numbers aren't just statistics. They are scientific proof that when human policy changes, when technology is applied, and when communities mobilize, nature responds. But before we celebrate too loudly, you always introduce the necessary nuance. Is this success truly uniform, or are there still areas fighting this battle?
That is the most crucial detail. The IUCN assessment is highly sophisticated. It doesn't just look at the green sea turtle as one big group. It assesses 11 distinct regional subpopulations. So the global least concern status is excellent, but it masks ongoing struggles. For example, populations in the Central and East Pacific, particularly off the coasts of Mexico and Central America, still face intense pressure from bycatch and poaching. They remain categorized as vulnerable or endangered. This means our global victory is conservation dependent and geographically uneven. We must maintain focus on those regional struggles.
That sets us up perfectly for the how. If accidental drowning in fishing nets bycatch was the single biggest killer at sea, the solution had to be technological. We're talking about the turtle excluder device, or the TED.
The TED is a fantastic example of applied engineering solving a major ecological problem. To understand the TED, you have to picture that shrimp net again, that giant conical sock dragged behind the boat. The back part of the net is where the shrimp end up.
And the problem is that the entire body of the net is essentially a long, one-way trap for the turtle.
Correct. So the TED changes the structure of that trap. It's a rigid metal grid, often made of aluminum or steel, installed right inside the net's narrow midsection, or its throat. This grid is angled, usually about 45 degrees.
So when water and everything in it rush into the net, the small, flat shrimp can slip through the bars of the grid.
Exactly. The bars are spaced perfectly for the shrimp to pass through and continue into the cod end, the bag where the fishermen want the catch. But when a larger, harder object like a sea turtle hits that angled grid, it acts like a ramp. The turtle can't pass through the bars, so the ramp redirects its momentum upward or downward toward a specialized escape opening.
So it's basically an intelligent escape hatch built right into the trap itself. And this wasn't a perfect solution overnight, was it? I imagine fishermen initially resisted the device.
Oh, resistance was significant in the 1970s and 80s. Early TED models were heavy, bulky, and caused what fishermen claimed was significant loss of target catch, meaning they thought they were losing shrimp. This created a real tension between conservation and livelihood.
So how did the technology evolve to overcome that resistance and become globally effective?
The design iterated rapidly. Modern versions, like the TTED, that's the trash and turtle excluder device, they address those concerns. They're now lightweight, made from specialized alloys, and designed to minimize drag on the boat, which saves fuel. Crucially, they became more efficient at excluding debris, rocks, and non-target fish, which actually improved the quality of the final shrimp catch. Certification data today confirms that when correctly installed and maintained, these modern devices are 97% effective at safely allowing a trapped turtle to exit the net.
97%. That's incredible. So we had this brilliant technology, but technology is useless without implementation. You can't just hope fishermen in 50 countries start using it. This is where policy had to drive global adoption.
This is a powerful case study in how a major consumer market can enforce conservation standards globally. The pivotal moment was the adoption of Public Law 101-162, Section 609, by the United States government.
So lay out the mechanism of that law for us. How did it work?
The law mandated that the U.S. Department of State must certify every year that any country exporting shrimp to the United States either has a comparable TED-based conservation program in place for its fleet, or that the particular type of fishing conducted by that country poses no threat to sea turtles. If they couldn't certify that, the U.S. would ban the import of shrimp from that nation.
Wow. So the U.S., as the world's largest consumer market for shrimp, essentially told the world, if you want access to our money, you must protect sea turtles.
Precisely. It was an economic lever that exported a high conservation standard worldwide. Countries like Ecuador, Mexico, Thailand, and others, which rely heavily on shrimp export revenue, quickly had to mandate and enforce TED use among their domestic fishing fleets. This created a global safety net that turtles needed, especially since they migrate through dozens of different countries' waters. Without this policy driver, the technological solution would have remained niche.
That addressed the threats at sea. But the turtle's fate is also decided on the sand. The battle for the nesting beaches, the nursery, was won not by metal grids, but by people power.
That's the story of community ownership. When local people transition from seeing the turtle as a resource to seeing it as community heritage, the protection becomes intrinsic. We see this beautifully illustrated in Mexico, at places like Campamento Tortuguero Ayotcali.
What exactly did they change on the ground there?
In many coastal areas of Mexico, harvesting turtle eggs was a long-standing tradition for food and supplemental income. Ayotcali volunteers and staff, often former egg collectors themselves, established intensive beach patrol programs. They walk the beaches at night, identify newly laid nests, and face a constant battle against poachers and natural predators like feral dogs.
So they couldn't just leave the nests in place.
Not initially, not until the community protection was absolute. They strategically relocated endangered nests into secure, protected, semi-natural hatcheries, essentially fenced-off, secure plots on the beach. Here, the eggs could incubate safely, monitored by dedicated staff, until the baby turtles hatched.
And the protection rate and success rate of this intervention are just astounding.
They are. In the most recent season, so 2024-2025, they recorded protecting nearly 90% of all viable nests on their monitored beaches. This led to the successful release of over 80,000 tiny hatchlings into the Pacific Ocean every single year.
The cultural shift here seems just as important as the ecological one.
Absolutely. The organization shifted the perception of the turtle from being a consumable product to a cultural icon. The release of the hatchlings, the determined, frantic scramble to the sea, is now a massive community ritual. It's accompanied by music, ceremonies, and celebration. It's a point of pride, which means the conservation is self-sustaining because the community has adopted the turtle as a core part of its identity.
And we see a similar economic approach to conservation in Southeast Asia with the Anambas Foundation in Indonesia. They turned conservation into an income source.
That model is crucial for long-term viability. The Anambas Foundation focused on high-density nesting beaches that were traditionally targets for egg collection. They didn't just impose rules, they created jobs. They hired local community members, turtle rangers, to patrol, monitor, and relocate nests, paying them a steady income.
So instead of selling a basket of eggs once, The local person gets a reliable, sustained salary to protect the nesting beach for the whole community.
which is a far greater long-term economic benefit. The impact was immediate and measurable. Social impact surveys conducted in 2025 indicated an 80% decrease in the consumption and sale of turtle eggs among local villagers compared to the pre-program era. Furthermore, their tagging efforts showed that the protected breeding females returned reliably, ensuring the increase in the next generation.
While the big numbers tell the population story, the individual stories remind us of the immense resilience required. Let's talk about Bob and Baki, two famous survivors from South Africa, who show us both the incredible power of recovery and the ongoing reality of the threat.
Bob's story is a testament to perseverance. When he was rescued, he was suffering terribly from plastic ingestion. He had essentially eaten a plastic salad. He excreted entire recognizable plastic balloons during his initial recovery. More worryingly, doctors diagnosed him with severe brain damage, likely from the lack of oxygen or the chemical load.
And initially, the prognosis was grim, right?
Yes. Veterinarians marked him as unreleasable, too damaged to survive in the wild. But Bob fought back. He underwent an intensive 8-year rehabilitation program at the Two Oceans Aquarium. Slowly, he regained neurological function and strength. His successful release in 2023, tracked by satellite tags showing him integrating back into normal feeding patterns, became a global symbol of the species' hard-won ability to bounce back from human-caused injury.
But then there's Boki, whose story is more cautionary.
Bucky arrived as an amputee, a tragic reminder of entanglement injury. She, too, had consumed immense amounts of waste, excreting 49 separate pieces of hard plastic during her care. She was rehabilitated and successfully released, but her journey ended abruptly. Her satellite tag stopped transmitting just 150 days later. While we can't be 100% certain, the primary suspicion among researchers is death by a major vessel strike a boat hitting her, or re-entanglement in abandoned fishing gear.
Baki's story cuts through the celebration, reminding us that the threats, plastic, vessel traffic, haven't gone anywhere. The population is resilient, but the ocean environment is still incredibly hazardous for these individuals.
It's the perfect transition point. We move from a success story fought on beaches and in coastal waters to a success story fought in diplomatic conference rooms, aimed at protecting the 2/3 of the planet where these turtles spend most of their lives.
Right. The green sea turtle recovery happened largely within national jurisdiction, the beaches and the coastal 200-mile zones. But these animals are travelers. They spend vast portions of their lives in the high seas, the open ocean that belongs to no one country.
That's the critical distinction. When we talk about the high seas, we are talking about the areas outside any country's exclusive economic zone, or EE. This area covers 64% of the world's ocean surface. That is an enormous amount of planetary space.
And for centuries, because it didn't belong to any single government, it became a legal Wild West.
A Wild West governed by fragmented, often contradictory, or sometimes non-existent rules when it came to conservation. Fishing was regulated by one body, seabed mining by another, and shipping by a third. There was no overarching mandate dedicated solely to protecting biodiversity in that shared global space. The consequence was dire. Before 2025, less than 1.5% of the high seas had any form of legal protection.
This created the massive governance gap that allowed for unregulated, often damaging exploitation. And this is exactly what the BBNJ agreement was designed to fix.
EBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction, is the official name, but its popular title is the High Seas Treaty. It is the new, globally agreed-upon rulebook that finally establishes a legal structure for conservation in the global commons.
And this wasn't a fast negotiation. This involved nearly 20 years of wrangling among almost 200 nations. What made the negotiations so complex and drawn out?
The initial preparatory work began way back in 2004, but the real difficulty lay in two core areas: money and sovereignty. Nations were arguing fiercely over who would pay for enforcement and, critically, who would benefit from the marine genetic resources found in the deep sea. The formal negotiations, which spanned 5 long and contentious sessions between 2018 and 2023, including the delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, were characterized by debates over intellectual property rights and benefit sharing.
They finally agreed on the text in March 2023, but agreement isn't law. What was the critical step that made 2025 the watershed year?
The treaty required 60 nations to formally deposit their instruments of ratification with the United Nations. That magical number turns a diplomatic agreement into binding international law.
And the ratifications poured in throughout 2024 and 2025.
Yes. There was a huge push leading up to the UN Ocean Conference in June 2025, bringing the total count to 51. But the ultimate pivot point was September. On September 19th, 2025, the Kingdom of Morocco deposited the 60th instrument of ratification. This act immediately triggered the countdown, meaning the High Seas Treaty will automatically enter into force 120 days later in January 2026. This means that for the first time in history, the vast open ocean will have a coordinated, legally binding conservation framework.
That is an immense diplomatic victory. Now let's simplify the actual mechanism of the rulebook. What are the four main things this treaty allows the world to do?
We can break the BBNJ agreement down into four crucial pillars, which together close that governance gap.
Pillar 1 is the most familiar and perhaps the most powerful tool.
This is the treaty's conservation engine. Prior to BBNJ, establishing large cross-boundary MPAs in the high seas required consensus from every single body involved: fishing commissions, shipping organizations, and individual nations. It was functionally impossible due to the need for unanimous approval.
Because even one nation could hold up protection indefinitely if they felt it impacted their fishing fleet or deep-sea mining interests.
Precisely. The DBNJ changes the process, making it possible to propose, evaluate, and crucially vote on the designation of large protected areas in international waters. This shifts the dynamic from requiring absolute consensus to a more workable majority process. This new mechanism is the absolutely vital pathway for achieving the global 30 by 30 goal, the commitment by nations to formally protect 30% of the world's ocean by the year 2030.
And for those of you wanting a more detailed look at the mechanics of ocean protection, we did a whole separate session on MPAs earlier this season. If you'd like to learn more, you should definitely check out that one.
Pillar 2 is what caused so much friction in the negotiating rooms: marine genetic resources, or MGRs.
This is the argument over the deep sea's treasure chest, right?
It is. MGRs refer to the genetic material, the DNA found in marine organisms, particularly those living in the extreme environments of the deep sea, like hydrothermal vents or deep-sea trenches. Scientists look to these organisms, such as specialized bacteria or unique sponges, for compounds that might lead to new anti-cancer drugs, cosmetics, or industrial enzymes.
The problem was that only a handful of wealthy nations have the specialized submersibles and technology to collect and process these resources. So they were finding the treasure and keeping all the benefits.
That's the core of the equity issue. Developing nations argued that the ocean is the common heritage of mankind, and therefore the benefits derived from its genetic resources should be shared globally. The treaty resolves this by establishing a framework for the fair and equitable sharing of benefits.
How does that actually work in practice? It sounds like a complex legal minefield.
It creates a mechanism that involves both monetary and non-monetary sharing. If a bioprospecting company from a developed nation finds a blockbuster drug using an MGR, a portion of the royalties or profits will be paid into a global benefit-sharing fund. This fund will then be distributed to support capacity building and research in developing nations. Non-monetary benefits include sharing research data, samples, and scientific publications immediately, ensuring that the knowledge gained is not locked behind exclusive intellectual property rights.
So this ensures that even nations without sophisticated deep-sea fleets benefit from the discoveries made in the global commons. Okay, Pillar 3 is a preventative measure: environmental impact assessments, or EIAs.
This is the rule that mandates look before you leap. Before the BBNJ, if a country wanted to start a potentially destructive activity in the high seas, say a huge deep-sea mining operation or experimenting with large-scale ocean geoengineering, there was no consistent, legally binding requirement to assess the environmental harm beforehand.
So now the treaty imposes a duty of due diligence.
Precisely. Nations or companies proposing activities that could cause more than minor or transitory effect on the high seas environment must conduct a detailed EIA. This assessment must be transparent, subject to public scrutiny, and approved by the new scientific and technical body established by the treaty. It's about bringing accountability to activities that were previously conducted in the dark.
And finally, Pillar 4, capacity building and technology transfer. Why is this necessary?
It ensures that the rulebook isn't just enforced by the wealthy nations who wrote it. If the global south can't afford the satellite tags, the research vessels, or the scientific training to participate in research and governance, the treaty will fail to achieve truly global cooperation.
So it's a mandated mechanism for sharing the tools.
Yes. Developed nations are required to assist developing states with funding, technical training, such as taxonomy or remote sensing techniques, and technology transfer. This allows all nations to effectively monitor their waters, participate in the MPA proposal process, and reap the benefits of the MGR provisions. It levels the playing field for conservation and research.
With the rulebook now forged, the immediate critical step is to start drawing those lines on the map, designating the first set of new high seas MPAs. The conservation community has identified several ecological superpowers that are first in line for protection.
We've identified 4 key areas that illustrate the variety and importance of life in the high seas. First, let's travel to the southeastern Pacific, off the coasts of Chile and Peru, the Celis y Gomez and Nazca Ridges.
Describe this underwater feature for us.
Imagine a massive, rugged, continuous mountain chain stretching over 2,900 kilometers. That's nearly the distance from New York to Los Angeles. This chain is formed by a series of undersea volcanoes, known as seamounts. Ecologically, it acts as a critical swimway for megafauna. It's an aquatic superhighway for migratory species like leatherback turtles, swordfish, and blue whales.
And what makes the life here so special, aside from the travelers?
It is an intense hotspot of endemism. This means that the species living there, the strained, often brightly colored fish, corals, and invertebrates, exist only on these ridges and nowhere else on Earth. Scientific surveys show that nearly half of the species collected here are endemic. This is a fragile biological oasis.
And the threat is physical destruction.
Precisely. The deep water trawling industry historically targeted these seamounts. A trawl net can easily destroy ancient, slow-growing ecosystems like cold water coral forests, some of which take thousands of years to grow, in a single devastating pass. The BBNJ Treaty allows for the protection of the high seas segments of these ridges, connecting the national protected areas already established by Chile and Peru, creating one vast, resilient sanctuary.
Our second area is dynamic, not fixed. We move to the eastern tropical Pacific for the Costa Rica thermal dome.
This is a remarkable feature because it's not defined by geology but by ocean dynamics. The dome is an area where a combination of surface winds and the Earth's rotation pushes warm surface water away, causing deep, cold, nutrient-rich water to rise up to replace it.
So it's a constant, massive nutrient delivery system, like a giant rotating buffet.
We call it a massive biological hotspot. The infusion of rich, cold water fuels huge blooms of phytoplankton. These microscopic plants form the bottom of the food chain, which then attracts everything else. This dome is known as a major feeding, breeding, and calving ground for everything from blue whales, the largest animals on Earth, to huge schools of tuna and various species of sea turtles.
But because ocean currents shift, this buffet moves seasonally. How does the BBNJ Treaty propose to protect something that won't stay still?
This is the critical test case for the treaty's innovation, the concept of dynamic marine protected areas. We cannot draw a fixed box on a map here. The boundaries of the protected zone will need to be flexible, expanding and contracting and shifting north or south based on real-time data collected by satellites and oceanographic sensors that track the dome's movement. This requires advanced international cooperation and the technology transfer mandated in Pillar 4.
The third priority area takes us into the North Atlantic for a feature we have analyzed previously, the Sargasso Sea.
The Sargasso Sea is unique globally. It is the only sea not defined by land borders, but entirely by 4 major ocean currents, the North Atlantic gyre that swirl around it, trapping its contents. Its signature feature is the vast, golden floating mats of sargassum seaweed.
And as our listeners who checked out our previous session will know, this seaweed is much more than just floating vegetation.
It is a critical ecosystem unto itself, often called the golden rainforest of the ocean. It serves as the absolutely essential nursery and spawning ground for multiple species, including the critically endangered European and American eels, which travel thousands of miles from freshwater rivers to reproduce there. It also provides vital shelter, camouflage, and food for juvenile loggerhead turtles who drift there as they grow up.
Given its location in the middle of a major shipping lane, it faces unique threats like pollution and the accumulating garbage from the North Atlantic garbage patch.
While the Sargasso Sea Commission has existed for years, it previously lacked the power to create and enforce binding regulations. The High Seas Treaty provides the necessary legal teeth. By empowering the Commission through the BBNJ, it means that rules designed to control harmful activities, like certain forms of fishing, dumping, or regulating shipping, can finally be enforced. It elevates the protection from voluntary guidelines to binding international law.
And finally, we head back out into the North Pacific to examine the Emperor Seamounts.
This is another deep-sea mountain chain extending thousands of miles from the tip of the Hawaiian Islands west toward the Aleutian Trench. It functions as a critical series of stepping stones, serving as pit stops and breeding grounds for species migrating across the vast expanse of the North Pacific.
Why do they require immediate protection?
They are home to some of the oldest living animals on Earth, ancient deep-sea coral gardens. Specific species like the glass sponges and slow-growing cold-water corals, such as Lophelia pertusa, form massive, complex structures that can be thousands of years old.
And, like the Nazca Ridges, they were heavily scarred by past human activity.
Terribly so. Historical records show that distant water trawling fleets heavily impacted this area, with evidence suggesting that between 19 and 29% of these delicate seamount ecosystems bear severe trawling scars. The speed at which these slow-growing ecosystems can recover is glacial. The protection enabled by the BBNJ is essential to ensure a recovery period without further destruction, effectively closing them off to harmful fishing gear.
These two stories, the green sea turtle resurrection and the new rulebook, are undeniable signs of what's possible. But they both required a massive fundamental shift in human perspective, moving from a mindset of exploitation to stewardship. Why did countries and communities around the world finally change their minds? Was it purely altruism, or was there a simple economic argument that flipped the script?
It was a powerful blend, but the simple economic truth became undeniable. Nature is worth significantly more when it is live and protected than when it is consumed. This concept, valuing nature as natural capital, is the new engine for conservation.
How was that economic calculation proven for the turtles?
A detailed study by the World Wildlife Fund analyzed the economic activity at 18 green sea turtle nesting sites globally. They calculated the revenue generated by marine turtle tourism people paying for boat tours, accommodation, and guiding services just to see turtles. The result was staggering. That tourism generated nearly 3 times more annual revenue, $1.65 million, than the value generated by selling the turtle products, which amounted to only $582,000.
So seeing a turtle is literally worth 3 times more than consuming it. That's a powerful incentive.
It makes perfect economic sense. When we look globally, wildlife tourism is now valued at up to 5 times the value of illegal wildlife trade. It transforms a one-time product sale into a renewable economic engine that pours sustainable revenue into local coastal communities. This economic argument is what drove many nations to enforce the TED mandates and what motivates communities in Mexico and Indonesia to become turtle rangers.
And the same principle applies to the high seas. We protect it not just because it's morally right, but because it provides trillions of dollars in ecosystem services, like carbon absorption, global fisheries, and oxygen production.
Which brings us to our essential final point. Neither of these victories is permanent without continuous active effort. The recovery of the green sea turtle, for instance, is rightly described as conservation dependent. It's entirely reliant on the continued enforcement of the policies and community protection programs we just discussed.
And climate change introduces a completely new, insidious threat to this recovery that we must understand: the gender imbalance.
This is a critical, looming crisis tied to temperature-dependent sex determination, or TSD. Simply put, the temperature of the sand where the clutch of eggs is incubating determines the sex of the hatchling. Cooler sands produce male turtles. Warmer sands produce female turtles.
With global temperatures steadily rising, especially coastal sand temperatures, we are tilting the scales dramatically.
Exactly. Researchers are finding nesting beaches globally where hatchlings are now registering as high as 99% female. If almost every baby turtle born is a girl, the population faces a massive demographic bottleneck. There simply won't be enough male turtles to mate with the next generation of females, leading to a catastrophic reproductive collapse down the line.
So conservation efforts are moving beyond just protecting nests from poachers to actively trying to cool the sand. What physical interventions are researchers testing?
They're actively testing several innovative yet simple strategies. One is solar shading, erecting simple shade structures like large tarps or woven palm shelters over the nests during the hottest parts of the day to keep the sand temperature down. Another is active irrigation, lightly wetting the sand surface with cool seawater during the incubation period, which mimics natural cooling and produces more male hatchlings. The battle has changed from preventing deaths to managing temperature.
The challenges for the High Seas Treaty are equally complex, particularly the threat of the paper park.
The paper park is the biggest existential threat to the BBNJ agreement. A paper park is an area that is protected only on paper, a line drawn on a map, but which lacks the funding, enforcement, and monitoring necessary to make that protection real.
Rules are meaningless if they aren't enforced, and the high seas are vast and incredibly difficult to patrol with traditional naval vessels.
It requires advanced, expensive technology and unprecedented international cooperation. Currently, only about 2.7% of existing MPAs worldwide are considered truly well managed and enforced. The success of the BBNJ hinges on strong financial commitment to monitoring. This means utilizing satellite-based remote sensing, such as synthetic aperture radar, to detect vessels illegally fishing or operating in protected zones, even in bad weather. It also means tracking vessels using their mandatory vessel monitoring systems and using acoustic monitoring arrays to detect the sounds of illegal activity. The new international law needs real-world technological eyes and ears to ensure the rules are respected.
The major maritime powers that champion this treaty must now ensure they commit the funds to turn those paper rules into tangible ocean parks.
It's the next decade's essential task.
The year 2025 delivered two monumental reminders of hope and resilience. The green sea turtle's incredible comeback proved that biological damage can be reversed when we apply technology and empower local communities. The creation and ratification of the High Seas Treaty proved that the world can finally agree on a crucial, legally binding rulebook for the global commons.
We have forged the necessary tools, the technological shields like the TEDs, the passionate community commitment, and the international rulebook for the high seas. The task ahead is using those tools consistently and expanding their reach.
Thank you so much for joining us for this inspiring look back at the biggest ocean conservation stories of the year. Your curiosity is what drives us, and we sincerely thank you for being part of the Saltwater Stories community.
And as we close out 2025, think about this provocative thought. The green sea turtle needed a specialized shield, the TED, and a safe place, which was the protected beaches. The high seas now has a global rulebook. What simple, everyday action can you take in the new year, whether it's actively reducing your plastic footprint or supporting organizations that work on the front line of these battles to help ensure that these hard-won victories endure?
Think about that ripple effect of your actions. From all of us at Saltwater Stories, we wish you a happy and healthy new year, and we can't wait to see you in the new year as we kick off Season 3 of Saltwater Stories.